Hi, this is Abby Church, and this is the USD 418 FERPA training for all staff. So first, let's start with what is FERPA. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It's a federal law that protects the confidentiality of student education records. This law applies to all educational entities that receive federal funds from the U.S. Department of Education. And so any public school district that's receiving funds has to be in compliance with this FERPA law. So what exactly does FERPA provide within its laws? So first and foremost is the right of parents and adult age students to inspect and receive copy of student records. Adult age of students means those who are 17 or younger or applied in or enrolled in a college or secondary institution. So the parents can either request that or those of the adult age. The parents or adult age student can deny access to others, especially those who are outside the schools, to have access to those records. There is a hearing process that parents, guardians, or the adult age student can apply for to correct any errors on this information or any of their records. The complaint process is handled by the Family Compliance Office of the U.S. Department of Education. So parents cannot sue over this, but they can have a due process hearing to correct any errors. By being in this, another thing that falls under the FERPA law is the right to opt out of military recruitment, and they can also opt out the disclosure of a student's directory information, which we will go into further here in a little bit on our presentation. So FERPA prevents disclosure of information from a student's education record, but doesn't prevent disclosure of directory information. So you may be asking yourself, what is the difference between the two of education record and directory information? So education records, to briefly explain that, are directly related to a student that are maintained by the school or a third party on behalf of the school. So if a school district contracts with or has services like with certain websites or apps, that could be a third party vendor. But FERPA prohibits the release of education records without parental consent or the consent of an eligible student. So with education records, we cannot share those without the consent of a parent. So what exactly is included in an education record? Here are some examples: student grades, health records that the school, like your school nurse, may maintain, any kind of disciplinary records or charts, information, data that's kept, your student progress reports like grade cards, any kind of testing that's done, attendance records, and grade point average. So in order for us to share that with any outside entity, we have to have parental consent for that. So within those, education record is called PII, which is personal identifiable information. So this would generally allow a person in the school community to identify a student within reasonable certainty. FERPA, though, prohibits the release of any personal identifiable information contained in a student's education record unless it's directory information. So we briefly have already talked about a student's education record. Now let's talk about what's directory information. So these are considered personally identifiable information that is not generally considered harmful if disclosed. So a student's name, their address, as you can see, there's actually quite a bit of examples on here. Grade level, if they're a major field of study, those are all generally not considered harmful if it is given out. So an example of this would be in elementary school, sometimes parents will sign consent or give the permission that their information is in a directory that's passed out that has their address and phone number that's given to the entire class. Exceptions to FERPA. So this is in some exceptions that we are protected as a school if something was to occur, that we could give out these personal identifiable information. So health or safety emergencies. So for example, a student has an emergency reaction to a food allergy and the EMS arrives, well, they wouldn't be falling under that. They'd be falling under the outside entity. So it would be okay in that instance to say that they were allergic to such food allergy because it is an identifiable information. Other school officials that have educational interests or goals. So within your school, if you've had concerns on behaviors, you would talk to the school counselor. So, an example of that would fall under that. How to ensure we're in FERPA compliance. So when you're within the classroom, protect your personal information, especially when using technology in the classroom. Don't let students use any personal information unless it's been approved. Keep all of your student data in a secure location. If you're still using saving hard copies or grade books, even secure within your software system that you're using. Don't discuss student information with others unless they have a legitimate concern or educational interest in the student. We kind of talked about that with the school counselor. And then make sure you know who the legal guardians are of the students in your class before releasing any information. So making sure they have the right and consent to receive that information before you start talking to them. On the other side of that, without the classroom and just as a district as a whole, take this time to learn and understand how to comply with FERPA. Know the third-party vendors that the school district is using, and you can get those from either the technology department or from your school administrator or your tech site coordinator. And especially contact them if you're looking at a different website or app you're wanting to use, and make sure that it is safe and okay by the district. And attending an annual FERPA training so that you are refreshed before you start the school year and understanding all the compliance with issues with that. Encrypt files and emails as you're sending them, especially to outside entities, and making sure that you can talk to the tech department if you're having questions about that, and implement other prevention tools. So talking to your students about being safe with the data in the classroom, making sure that could use encrypted files, talking to the tech department to make sure that we have everything in place that we can to prevent any kind of data breaches or security breaches. So some common mistakes that we've seen with FERPA is, again, we talked about being careful of the vendors, screening accordingly, like making sure we know that they are within compliance of FERPA as well, because it falls back on the school, not the vendor. If student information was released, knowing when to release or withhold data, so making sure you know if we need consent or not need consent from parents and guardians. Be cautious of who held what information. So if, I think the example given is if there was a fight with the student, you could talk to a parent about the student being in a fight, but not giving the other student's name, and especially being cognizant of what we're posting on social media, not giving out any kind of personal identifiable information on there, and knowing when and how to destroy data and student information within your classes. Make sure that if you have any questions concerning FERPA, that you talk to your administrator. Remember that our student safety is our first priority. So if you ever just are unsure before you go ahead and submit or release or talk to anyone and you're not too sure about it, please talk to your administrator so that we can ensure that we're keeping our students safe. Again, thank you for attending the training, and if you have further questions or ideas, please contact us or your building administrator. Thank you.